Pleased to be joined in a second half of an interview with Mike Wirth, Chairman and CEO of Chevron, out at their headquarters here in San Ramon, California. Mike, thanks for agreeing to sit down with us for a longer form, more thoughtful conversation. It's much appreciated.
You bet, Brian.
Let's talk about where we left off, and that is the renewables, the energy shift, if you will. You just created a new position, Chevron New Energies. What's the goal there? Is it hydrogen? Is it carbon capture? And how do people, because they're skeptical of words, corporate words, they want action. Where is this going to lead?
Well, Brian, there are new technologies that can help contribute to diversifying the energy system and creating lower carbon sources of energy. And we intend to be a leader in that space and to leverage the capabilities, technologies, and experience that we have and the assets that we have. So our primary focus in this will be renewable fuels. It's renewable natural gas, renewable diesel, sustainable aviation fuel, carbon capture, and hydrogen. And so this is an organization to accelerate our progress in identifying the investment opportunities, the projects, and bringing these into the market at a greater pace and greater scale.
Are they economic?
It depends. In many instances, these are economic when you are operating in an environment like we're in California, where there is a regulatory structure that creates incentives, tradable credits, and things like that. Program is designed to encourage investment, and so it does just that. It creates conditions that allow investors to bring capital into these technologies and see a return on those investments. So it's not economic everywhere, but it is economic in a number of markets around the world.
Well, that's interesting. You mentioned California. We'll get to more on California, where we are in just a second. Going back to that, because that's, I think, there's this push-pull between the evolving shift of energy, renewables, California outlawing gas-powered cars being sold after 2035, and investors saying, okay, Mike, that's good, but I own your stock. I need to make sure you can still make money from these things. Where are we in that balance right now?
Well, let me start with where the world is. The world is powered by an energy system that is larger than it's ever been, demand that is as large as it's ever been. 7.5 billion people on the planet today, 20 years from now, over 9 billion people. Middle class that's growing, all of that requires energy to support that growth. So the energy system today needs to continue to meet that demand today, and we're a very big player in that business. That generates the cash that allows us to distribute cash to our shareholders and reinvest in the future, both in our traditional business and increasingly, we expect, into these new energy technologies. And so this will be an evolution, and we need to look down the road, but also right out the window and meet the needs of society today, even as we invest for a different energy system in the future.
So you said down the road and out the window. When I think of a road, I think of a car. I think of gasoline. When I think of a window here, I think of air conditioning. 7.5 to 9 billion people, they want a car, they also want air conditioning. They're two different things, though. You keep saying energy. Is that going to be a continued shift for Chevron to being more of an energy company and less of a sort of an oil and gas company?
Well, I think it will be. And our traditional business is oil and gas, and the world still needs it and will need it for a long time into the future. But we've got a 140-year history. When we first started producing oil, it wasn't for cars or for air conditioning or for airplanes. None of those things existed. It was for lighting and lamps, because actually whales were being hunted into extinction because whale oil was used for lighting. And so the first use of our product for decades was a cleaner, more affordable, more reliable source of light. And it's only in subsequent decades that these other uses came. And so we've been part of an evolving energy system for 140 years, and I think the future will continue to evolve. And so we'll see our portfolio grow in some of these new technologies, even as our current business continues to grow and meet society's needs along the way.
You talked about California. You kind of gave California a compliment there, Mike, as a Coloradan. I grew up in Southern California. My dad owned a gas station. I know that California is sort of an odd place for an oil and gas company to be based these days. They just have a new emissions rule. You have a Richmond refinery, so does PBF, by the way. Some sort of emissions. It's going to cost you guys a lot of money. Can you stay in California? Could Chevron remain? This is beautiful, but is this sustainable?
Well, Brian, this is our home. We made the first commercial discovery in Pico Canyon in Southern California back in 1879 and really founded the energy business in California, the oil and gas business in California, and we've been a part of this state's growth and evolution ever since. And as the economy has grown, as it has diversified, and as expectations have evolved, we work with the leaders of the state to try to advance policy that's good for the economy, good for the environment, supports investment and jobs. And so we've been here for a long time. There are no doubt tensions as the state pushes forward with its policies, and we try to engage and inform those policies with good science and economics. But we've had a collaborative, constructive relationship.
Are you engaging? So you can't, because your predecessor was a fifth-generation Californian.
He was.
You are not. So are you? You may not be as tied to the state. You've a lot of thousands of employees here, and by the way, it's everywhere else around the world for Chevron. Can you engage with the state? Are they listening?
Yeah, look, first of all, it doesn't matter where I came from or any executives come from. It's about our business. And we have a long history here of constructive engagement with the Air Resources Board at a state level, with local regulators, and our technical people and their technical people exchange information, engage in work together. And so we've got a very long history here of working to advance things that are good for the environment, but they're also cost-effective, affordable for the economy, and we continue to do that.
What's the next big transition for Chevron? Is it a revolution? Is it an evolution? What's the road ahead for you guys? If I say, what is Chevron going to look like in 10 or 20 years? Because a lot of investors, they buy the stock for 10 or 20 years from now.
Yeah, so I think it's going to, in many ways, the attributes that have defined our company for a long time will still be there. Consistency, people know what to expect from us. We're prepared for cycles in our business, and we've just gone through one and weathered it better than most in our industry.
Kind of a big one.
It was a big one.
Oil was negative for a day.
It was. And the third one is adaptability. We continue to evolve. I talked about where we began, and over our history, we've adapted to changes in technology, changes in markets, changes in geopolitics, changes in societal expectations. So 20 years from now, we will have a thriving, healthy traditional business, our oil and gas business, and I think we'll have a much larger, lower carbon energy business in hydrogen, in renewable fuels, carbon capture, that will be a high growth business, but we'll have a low growth, high cash generating and high return traditional business, which again takes care of our shareholders, as you mentioned, and it helps finance investments into these new technologies.
Okay, let's shift gears just a bit. Now, the challenges of running a global oil and gas company are immense. There are things outside of your core business you have had to deal with, maybe begun by your predecessors or even Texaco, a company you bought, allegations of pollution in Ecuador, lawsuits, high-profile lawsuits. Has it changed the way you've thought about doing business, either where you would do it or with whom you would do it?
Well, again, this is a continual evolution, Brian. We operate at a very high standard and an always raising standard of safety, of environmental protection, of health protection of our workforce, as we've talked a lot about over the last year. And look, the world is, we've got lawyers that, defend claims. They've got people that bring claims. And so we navigate these things.
A few high-profile ones.
But this is part of being a large company that works around the world, and the challenges in each country where we operate are unique to those countries. We've always tried to work with governments, with our neighbors, and find solutions that meet their needs and also meet our business needs. And so that's the nature of the business we're in.
Is it harder to run a core business dealing with flurries of outside headlines?
Well,
is it part of the gig?
You know, the 24-hour news cycle, social media, I think, has accelerated everything in terms of awareness of what's going on in the world. It's also created a lot of misinformation that people need to sift through. And so I do think that the context relative to those kinds of dynamics has changed, and we need to adapt in order to respond to that. But fundamentally, at the core, our business is about operating safely, reliably, meeting consumer needs, and doing that in a way that's efficient and competitive and creates value for shareholders.
Well, I think you said it well. I mean, being a fossil fuel company that is shifting, obviously, but it's a massive. I mean, you are, I mean, figuratively and literally, I guess, a super tanker. How do you tell the story of we're shifting, yes, but you can't shut down fossil fuels? We're in a wealthy area of California. You've traveled the world, I've traveled the world. I'm not going to go to Cairo, Egypt and tell people they need to drive an electric car because they don't have clean drinking water. How do you tell the story of the hydrocarbon in a way to say, listen, you know, we're moving, but we need to realize that this is a world that is outside of there's a big world outside of the United States that doesn't have our ability to do the things we do. Yeah. How do you tell that story?
Well, it's a really important point, Brian. I mean, at the highest level with our shareholders, I have a very simple message. It's about higher returns and lower carbon, and we need to do both. We need to generate higher returns out of our business and lower carbon out of our activities. But then we also have to recognize that every country has its own economic, environmental, and energy context. And as a guest operating in countries around the world, we can't tell them what is right for their economy and their environment. We have to work with them. Most of these countries are signatories to the Paris Agreement and have a plan for how they intend to evolve their energy system in compliance with those plans, and we need to work with them. But the context is different, and it does matter, and we have to respect that.
And you mentioned workforce, and we'll wrap it up with this. Obviously, diversity, equity, inclusion, incredibly important topics.
Absolutely.
The fossil fuel industry, the hydrocarbon, energy industry has been notoriously slow in the uptake of a more diverse workforce. How do you make Chevron a more diverse, a more inclusive place for everybody to feel welcome?
Well, this has been a core value of our company for a long time. In fact, if you were to read the Chevron Way, it's the very first value that we lead with. And we've made tremendous progress over the years. This is an industry that is grounded in certain technical and engineering disciplines, which historically have not been as diverse as we would like. That's changing. We recruit from HBCUs. We recruit a very diverse incoming workforce, and you can see change. Over 40% of our senior leaders now are not white males anymore. And our board,
so there is some metrics that are moving.
Our board is very diverse, and it continues both at the highest levels and throughout our organization. We are making progress on this. And look, we operate around the world. We need to have a workforce that represents the world that we work in. And we've made progress. There's more work to be done, but it's an absolute commitment and a core value of our company.
And it will remain a commitment to Chevron.
Absolutely.
Mike Wirth, Chairman and CEO of Chevron. Thank you again for the thoughtful interview, having us at your headquarters, and at some point having that diverse workforce back here sitting around this pond.
We're looking forward to that day, Brian.
All right, Mike, thank you very much.
You bet.